Grace Miller had spent 5 years planning her revenge, and it would taste sweeter than any cake she'd ever made. She stood in the marble lobby of the Hart Grand Hotel, her dark brown skin gleaming under crystal chandeliers, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows like an omen. The cake box in her arms, lavender honey with champagne buttercream, 3 perfect tiers, wasn't just a portfolio piece. It was a Trojan horse. Daniel Hart had thrown her away like garbage when she needed him most. One brutal text, and suddenly the white billionaire's son was too good for the black art student carrying his child. She'd vomited into gas station toilets alone, figured out how to be pregnant and broke at 25, while his family's money insulated him from consequences. Now she was 30, successful, and armed with the one weapon that would destroy him: the truth. Their 4-year-old son, sleeping peacefully back at her room, had his father's hazel eyes in her brown face. Evan was everything: her world, her purpose, her nuclear option. And Daniel Hart had no idea he existed. Not yet. Grace caught her reflection in a gilded mirror, her natural curls styled in an elegant updo, navy wrap dress hugging curves she'd earned back since pregnancy, makeup flawless. She looked expensive now. Nothing like the struggling student he'd discarded. "Ms. Miller?" A woman in a charcoal suit approached. "I'm Simone Ito, events coordinator, if you'll follow me." Grace smiled, practiced and cold. "Of course." The elevator chimed its ascent, a soft, melodic ding for each floor. Grace watched the numbers illuminate, her own reflection a pale, determined ghost in the polished brass. The doors slid open on a hushed corridor, leading to a test kitchen that smelled of stainless steel and cold, clean air. Windows overlooked Seattle's skyline through sheets of rain. Perfect stage for her opening act. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Simone said. "Someone from executive management will be with you shortly." Grace set the cake box down with steady hands and untied it with mechanical precision. No trembling now. She'd burned through her tears years ago, alone in a Portland studio apartment with a wailing newborn and blocked phone numbers. The cake looked flawless. Each layer precise, buttercream smooth as glass, sugared violets clustered at the base. Beautiful. Deceptive. She checked her phone. Evan at the zoo last month, laughing at penguins. Hazel eyes crinkled just like his father's. Same dimple, same stubborn cowlick. Undeniable proof. The kitchen door opened behind her, and she knew it was him. Grace didn't turn. Let him wait. Let him wonder. "I apologize for the delay. We had a board meeting run." His voice died mid-sentence. Grace felt it like a shockwave. She turned slowly, deliberately, and met Daniel Hart's gaze with Arctic composure. He looked older, silver at his temples, new lines around his mouth. His charcoal suit was immaculate despite rain spots on his shoulders. Those hazel eyes went wide with shock. He looked struck by lightning. "Hello, Daniel." Her voice came out cold, sharp. "Surprise." "Grace." He breathed her name like a prayer or curse. "What? How? How am I here?" She tilted her head. "I submitted a proposal for your spring menu, Miller Confections. Perhaps you've heard of us? We're quite sought after in Portland." Portland. He repeated it mechanically, frozen in the doorway. "You've been in Portland?" 5 years. Each word a knife. Building a business, making a life, doing perfectly fine without you. Something flickered across his face. Pain, confusion. He took one step forward, stopped. His hand rose, fell. 5 years, he said hoarsely. "You disappeared. I looked everywhere." "You looked?" The laugh that escaped her could draw blood. "You sent that text, blocked my number, had your people stonewalling me at every turn. You looked?" "What text?" Daniel had gone pale. Grace, what are you talking about? Oh, he was good. The confusion looked almost genuine. Don't. She held up one hand, nails painted blood red. Don't insult my intelligence. This isn't working. Don't contact me again. Ring any bells? I never. He gripped the doorframe. Grace, I swear, I never sent anything like that. The last message I sent asked about dinner. Thai or Italian, remember? You said Thai. I replied with a heart. That was it. You never responded after that? Interesting story. She crossed her arms. Makes it easier to sleep at night, I imagine. It's not a story. Daniel moved then, 3 strides that ate up space between them. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she smelled cedar and espresso and 5 years of buried memory. Show me. Show me this text you got. Grace pulled out her phone with shaking hands she refused to acknowledge. Scrolled to the message she'd saved for 5 years, the one that had destroyed her world. She held it up. Daniel leaned in, studying the screen. His face went from confused to horrified. That's not my number, he said quietly. What? Grace looked at the screen. The number she'd been calling for weeks after the text. The number that had been disconnected. Yes, it is. It's the number you always texted from. Look at the last digit. Daniel pulled out his own phone, showed her his number in his settings. Mine ends in 7. That one ends in 3. Grace, someone spoofed my number. Made it look close enough that you wouldn't notice in your contacts. Grace blinked, then opened his contact card. It's saved as the 3 in my iCloud. Her stomach dropped. I didn't change this. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then someone did. The night that text came, I got a weird, your Apple ID was used to sign in email. Her voice thinned. I thought it was spam. The blood drained from her face. They edited your contact. Grace's vision blurred as she stared at the 2 numbers side by side. He was right. The last digit was different. How had she never noticed? How had she spent 5 years calling a fake number, believing he'd blocked her when... I don't understand, she whispered. Neither did I. But now... Daniel's voice turned dark. Grace, what happened after you got that text? Exactly. I need to know everything. I tried calling you back immediately. Got a message saying the number was disconnected. Grace's throat felt tight. I thought you'd blocked me. I went to your apartment the next day. The doorman said you'd left on an extended business trip to Europe, no return date. I went to the hotel. Security said the same thing. Mr. Hart was traveling indefinitely for company business. I never went to Europe, Daniel said, looking sick. I was in Seattle the night that text was sent. My father shipped me to Tokyo the next day on a fake crisis. I was already trying to reach you before he sent me away. And then he made it sound like the entire company was at stake if I didn't go. The next morning, I was on a plane. That's impossible. I came here 3 times that first week. They turned me away every time. Because my father controls building security. Understanding was dawning, cold and terrible. He could have flagged you as unauthorized, had the doorman lie. Grace, what about your apartment, your friends? I couldn't afford rent alone, and I was panicking and pregnant. The words came faster now, 5 years of confusion spilling out. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I broke my lease, stayed with my sister in Eugene for 2 weeks while I figured out what to do. Then I left for Portland. Daniel went very still. Pregnant? Grace didn't flinch. We have a son, Daniel. Her voice was steady, merciless. His name is Evan. He's 4. 2 weeks, Daniel repeated hollowly, as if trying to breathe through a punch. I came looking for you 3 weeks after that last text. 3 weeks. Because I kept thinking you'd call, you'd explain, you'd... He stopped. Your landlord said you'd left about a week earlier. No forwarding address. And your friends. What about my friends? They said you didn't want to be found. That you'd moved on, started fresh somewhere, didn't want contact with anyone from Seattle. Daniel's hands curled into fists. I called everyone. Maya, Josh, that girl from your painting class, Sienna. I never had your sister's number or address. His hands curled into fists. People kept telling me you didn't want to be found. Sienna. Grace's mind was reeling. They said I didn't want to be found. Every single one. I thought I was going crazy. Kept calling until Maya finally told me to stop harassing people, that you'd made your choice, and I needed to respect it. Grace pulled out her own phone with trembling fingers, scrolled to Maya's number, hit call. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Grace? Oh my God, is everything okay? You never call. Maya. Grace's voice was steady despite the chaos in her chest. 5 years ago when I moved to Portland, did anyone contact you about me? What? Honey, what's going on? Please, just answer. Did anyone call you asking about me? Where I'd gone? A pause. Yeah, actually. Some guy from a law firm said he was handling your affairs, that you'd moved unexpectedly and wanted to make sure all your Seattle contacts knew not to reach out. Said you needed space to start over. Why? What law firm? I don't remember. It was 5 years ago, Grace. Some fancy-sounding name. He said you'd authorized him to contact everyone in your phone, that you were okay, but needed a clean break. We were all worried, but he seemed legit. And then you called from Portland a few weeks later and seemed fine, so... Maya's voice turned concerned. Grace, what's happening? Are you in trouble? No. Grace's gaze met Daniel's. I'm just figuring some things out. I'll call you back. She hung up. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. A lawyer? Grace said slowly. Contacted all my friends. Told them I wanted a clean break. Maya said he claimed I'd authorized it. You didn't. Of course I didn't. Grace felt like the ground was tilting beneath her. Daniel, what is this? What did your father do? Something unforgivable. Daniel's voice was ice. Grace, I need to show you something. Everything. But not here. Somewhere private where we can go through all of it. Phone records, security logs, everything from that time period. Why should I believe you? But even as she said it, Grace felt her certainty crumbling. The numbers were different. Her friends had been contacted by someone claiming to represent her. The doorman had lied. You could have set all this up, made it look like, I know. Daniel held her gaze. I know you have no reason to trust me. But Grace, I'm asking you to give me one chance. Let me show you the evidence. And if after seeing everything, you still think I abandoned you... His voice cracked. Then I'll walk away. I'll sign whatever custody papers you want. I'll set up support for Evan and disappear from your lives. But please, let me show you the truth first. Grace stared at him, at the raw desperation in his eyes, at the way his hands shook, at the grief written across every line of his face. She thought of Evan, of 4 years of questions she couldn't answer, of the little boy who deserved to know his father, if his father was worth knowing. You have until tomorrow, she said finally. Show me your evidence, all of it. And Daniel? She stepped closer, close enough to see her reflection in his eyes. If you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate game, I will destroy you. Your reputation, your company, everything. Do you understand? Yes. His voice was rough. Grace, I understand. And I'm not lying. I swear on everything I have, I'm not lying. Grace studied his face for a long moment, then nodded once sharply. The Fairmont, Room 412. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I'll be there. Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, do more, reach for her. But he stayed frozen, respecting the space between them. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. Grace didn't answer, just turned and gathered her things, hands steadier now that she had a plan. At the door, she paused, looked back. Daniel, he has your eyes and your smile, and he asks about you every single day. The devastation that crossed Daniel's face was almost too much to witness. Tomorrow, she said softly. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. Then she walked out into the rain, leaving Daniel Hart alone with the impossible truth taking shape between them. The same rain that, hours later, battered the windows of her suite at the Fairmont, where Grace lay staring at the ceiling, listening to it all, unable to sleep. Evan lay between Grace and her sister Jessica, up from Eugene the night before to protect her, his small hand fisted in Grace's shirt, his breathing deep and even. Those hazel eyes hidden behind closed lids, that dimple, his beautiful brown skin a shade lighter than hers, his loose curls that she braided every morning, every feature a blend of her and the man she'd spent 5 years hating. Except now, she didn't know what to think. The numbers were different. She checked 17 times since leaving the hotel. The text had come from a number 1 digit off from Daniel's real number. And her friends, all of them, had been contacted by someone claiming to represent her. What if Daniel was telling the truth? What if they'd both been victims of something bigger, darker, more calculated than a simple breakup? Grace's phone sat on the nightstand. She picked it up, scrolled through those old messages again, looked at every interaction she'd had with the number ending in 3. The number she'd thought was Daniel's. It had only ever sent her that one text. The breakup text. Every other message in their conversation history, months of sweet texts, inside jokes, late-night confessions, came from the number ending in 7. Daniel's real number. The number she'd never tried calling because she'd been using the fake one saved in her contacts. Oh, God, she whispered into the darkness. The long night finally gave way to a gray, drizzly morning. At 9:47 a.m., her phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the tense quiet. Unknown number. I'm downstairs. Early, I know, but I couldn't wait. I have everything. Room 412? Grace's heart kicked into overdrive. Grace, give me 10 minutes. We need to talk first. Alone. Unknown number. Anything. Whatever you need. She stood on shaking legs. Jess, can you keep Evan occupied? I need to talk to Daniel first. You sure? Jessica's dark eyes were sharp, protective. She'd held Grace through those first terrible months. He hurts you again. I don't care how rich he is. I know. Grace squeezed her sister's hand, then crouched beside Evan. Mama needs to talk to someone in the hallway. Stay here with Aunt Jess, okay? Okay. Evan didn't look up from his dinosaur documentary, syrup already on his chin from the room service pancakes. Did you know velociraptors were only 3 feet tall? You're so smart. Grace kissed his head, memorizing this moment, the last one before everything changed. Then she walked to the door. Daniel stood outside holding a leather messenger bag, coffee carrier, and pastries. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Same suit, different tie, but those eyes were shadowed, red-rimmed, haunted. Grace. Her name came out hoarse. Thank you. I couldn't sleep. Neither could I. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. The click felt final. They stood 3 feet apart in the carpeted corridor, the weight of 5 years pressing down between them. I have everything, Daniel said quietly, gesturing to the bag. Phone records going back 6 years. Security logs from my building and the hotel, banking records, email archives. He paused. and a preliminary report from the forensics team I hired. Grace, it's worse than I thought. Her stomach dropped. Show me. Daniel set the coffee and pastries on a console table, then pulled out a tablet from the bag. His fingers trembled slightly as he navigated to a folder. This is the phone analysis. He turned the screen toward her. The text you received came from a burner phone using a number spoofer app. The technology makes it look like any number the sender wants. They chose one digit off from mine, close enough that you wouldn't question it in your contacts. Grace stared at the technical breakdown, the timestamps, the digital fingerprints. The text was sent at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, 5 years ago. Daniel continued. At that exact time, I was in a board meeting with my father. Hotel security footage confirms it. He swiped to a video still showing Daniel in a conference room, clearly mid-discussion. I couldn't have sent it because I was in that room from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Your father, Grace said slowly, was also in that room. Daniel's jaw tightened. But he left twice. Once at 11:20, returned at 11:35. Once at 11:45, returned at midnight. The second absence lines up perfectly with when that text was sent. He swiped again. More footage. Victor Hart leaving the conference room, disappearing down a hallway. But that's not proof, Grace said, even as her heart hammered. He could have been in the bathroom, getting coffee. You're right. That's why I kept digging. Daniel's voice was grim. Grace, 3 days before that text, my father's assistant purchased a burner phone from an electronics store downtown. Paid cash. The forensics team tracked the purchase through store security footage. He showed her another video still. A woman in a professional suit buying a phone, clearly visible. Her name is Patricia Keene. She's worked for my father for 15 years. Does whatever he asks, no questions. Daniel swiped again. And here's the part that made me sick. The lawyer who contacted your friends, Martin Voss. He's on retainer with Hart Industries. Has been for 20 years. Handles sensitive family matters. Sensitive matters, Grace repeated hollowly. Making problems disappear. Daniel's hands curled into fists. I called him this morning. Told him I was reviewing old files and needed information about any work he'd done related to me 5 years ago. He hesitated, then said my father had invoked attorney-client privilege on those matters, and he couldn't discuss them without Victor's explicit permission. So he admitted there were matters. Yes. Daniel's eyes were blazing now. And when I told him I was Daniel Hart, COO of Hart Industries, and I was invoking my own authority to access those files, he said, and I quote, I'm afraid Mr. Victor Hart's instructions supersede your authority in this particular situation. Grace felt sick. He was following your father's orders. To erase you. Daniel's voice cracked. Grace, there's more. The doormen at my building, they were told you were an obsessed ex-girlfriend who was harassing me, that I'd requested you be turned away for my own safety. They were doing what they thought was protecting me. And the hotel? Same story. Security was told you were a security risk, that I'd ended things and you weren't taking it well. Daniel looked like he wanted to put his fist through a wall. Everyone thought they were helping me, and I had no idea because I was in Tokyo. I didn't want to go. Wanted to stay and figure out why you weren't responding. But he made it sound like the entire company's future was at stake. Made me feel like I was being childish for putting a relationship before family business. And there was no investor crisis like I told you yesterday. I got to Tokyo, and the property manager had no idea what I was talking about. Everything was fine. But by the time I realized it was a wild goose chase and flew back 3 weeks later, you were gone. Daniel's voice broke. You were already gone, and everyone was telling me you'd chosen to leave. And He stopped, throat working. I believed them. I believed you'd left me, and I never questioned it, because why would my own father lie about something like that? The pieces all fit together now. A perfect, calculated plan to separate them. To make sure a broke black art student disappeared from Victor Hart's precious son's life before she could trap him with a pregnancy or, God forbid, marriage. Grace's legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, Daniel's evidence playing through her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. He knew, she whispered. Your father knew I was pregnant. Daniel's face went white. What? I found out 2 weeks after that text. But Daniel, I'd been feeling sick for a week before that. Nauseous, exhausted. I mentioned it to you once, remember? I thought it was stress from finals. You said you'd been feeling off, Daniel said slowly, horror dawning in his eyes. And I said I'd make you soup, take care of you. That was 3 days before the text. And I saw your father that same day, Grace said, the memory surfacing like a drowning victim. I ran into him outside your apartment building. He asked how I was feeling, and I said I'd been under the weather. He looked at me. Daniel, he looked at me. Like he knew something I didn't. Asked if I'd seen a doctor. I said no, it was probably just stress. And he smiled and said, best to know for certain. These things have a way of complicating young lives. Daniel looked like he might be sick. He suspected, and he moved fast before you could confirm it, before you could tell me. God. Daniel pressed both hands over his face. Grace. I'm so sorry, Don't. She cut him off. Don't apologize for something he did. Daniel, we were both played, both manipulated by someone with more money and power than either of us knew what to do with. Is he in there? Daniel's gaze went to the closed door, longing naked on his face. Evan? Yes. But Daniel. Grace took a shaky breath. Before you meet him, I need you to understand something. I spent 5 years believing you threw us away. 5 years building my anger, feeding it, letting it sustain me. And now you're telling me that anger was misdirected, that I should have been hating your father instead of you. You had every right to hate whoever you thought abandoned you. But that's just it. Grace's eyes burned. I don't know how to let go of 5 years of fury in one morning. I don't know how to just switch it off, even knowing the truth. You don't have to. Daniel's voice was soft, careful. Grace, you don't have to forgive me or trust me or let me into Evan's life just because my father's a manipulative monster. You can still hate me if you need to. But please, his voice cracked. Please let me meet my son. Let me know him. Even if you never want to see me again after today, let me know him. Grace studied his face. The desperation, the grief, the love already blooming for a child he'd never met. And she thought of Evan, asking about his daddy every single day. Okay, she said softly. But Daniel, he doesn't know yet that you're his father. I told him we were meeting an old friend. What do you want me to say? Nothing. Not today. Grace's hand went to the door handle. Today you just meet him, get to know him, let him get comfortable with you. We tell him the truth when he's ready. Whatever you think is best. Daniel's hands were shaking again. Grace, thank you. For this. For giving me a chance. I'm not doing this for you, she said quietly. I'm doing it for Evan. He deserves to know his father. Even if his father's family is a nightmare, Daniel finished. I know. And Grace, after today, after you've had time to process everything, I'm cutting ties with my father. Completely. I don't care about the company, the money, the Hart name. None of it matters more than... He stopped, gaze locked on the door. Than him. Grace's throat went tight. She opened the door. Jessica looked up from her coffee, eyes narrowing when she saw Daniel. Protective, ready to fight. But Evan had turned at the sound, syrup-sticky smile already in place, and stopped. He stared at Daniel. Daniel stared back. The resemblance was there. Those hazel eyes in Evan's brown face, that dimple, that cowlick. A beautiful blend of both of them. "Whoa," Evan breathed. "You have my eyes." The room went absolutely still. Daniel made a choked sound and pressed a hand over his mouth. "Evan, baby, this is Daniel," Grace managed. "The friend I told you about." But Evan was already walking toward Daniel, head tilted, studying him with 4-year-old intensity. "You have my eyes," he repeated. "And my chin dimple, see?" He pointed to his own face, then Daniel's. "Right there. We match." "We do." Daniel crouched to Evan's height, voice cracking. "You're very observant." "I'm smart," Evan announced matter-of-factly. "Mama says I get that from my daddy." "Do you know my daddy?" The question was innocent, guileless. It destroyed every adult in the room. Daniel's gaze snapped to Grace. Desperate, begging permission. Grace's throat was too tight to speak. She managed a tiny nod. Daniel turned back to Evan, and his smile was tremulous, aching. "I do know him. He's been thinking about you for a very long time." "Really?" Evan's whole face lit up. "Does he like dinosaurs?" "I think he's learning to." Daniel's smile was genuine now, despite the tears threatening to spill. "What's your favorite dinosaur?" "Velociraptor." Evan launched into an enthusiastic explanation, complete with hand gestures and sound effects, and Grace watched Daniel's heart fall completely, irrevocably in love. He listened like Evan was explaining the secrets of the universe, asked questions, laughed at Evan's jokes. And when Evan spontaneously grabbed Daniel's hand to drag him over to see the documentary. "You can watch with me. This part's about pack hunting." Daniel looked back at Grace with such raw, overwhelming emotion that she had to turn away or start crying. Jessica appeared at her elbow. "Gracie," she whispered. "You okay?" "I don't know," Grace admitted quietly, watching Daniel settle on the couch with Evan pressed against his side like he'd always belonged there. "Jess, his father did this. Victor Hart orchestrated everything. The text, the blocked calls, the lies to my friends, all of it." "Jesus." Jessica's hand found Grace's, squeezed. "So Daniel really didn't know." "He really didn't know." Grace's voice cracked. "He's been grieving me for 5 years, thinking I left him, and I've been hating him, thinking he threw us away, and neither of us knew that someone else was pulling all the strings." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Grace watched Daniel carefully tuck Evan's hair behind his ear, the gesture so tender and natural, it stopped her heart. "I don't know how to feel about any of this. Part of me wants to rage at Victor Hart. Part of me wants to cry for the 5 years we lost, and part of me..." She trailed off. "Part of you what?" Jessica prompted gently. "Part of me is terrified," Grace admitted. "Because if Daniel's telling the truth about everything, if he really wanted to marry me, really would have stayed, really loves Evan already this much." She took a shaky breath. "Then I don't know how to protect my heart from hoping again." Jessica pulled her into a hug. Grace closed her eyes, breathing in her sister's familiar comfort. On the couch, Evan was chattering away about Mesozoic periods, and Daniel was hanging on every word like it was scripture. "Did you know velociraptors were probably really smart?" Evan was saying seriously. "Smarter than most dinosaurs." "Like you," Daniel replied, voice thick with emotion. Really smart. Evan beamed. Then, with devastating 4-year-old directness, "Are you going to stay? Or do you have to leave like most grown-ups do?" The question hung in the air. Daniel looked at Grace. She looked back. And in that moment, standing in a hotel room with their son between them and 5 years of wreckage behind them, they both felt the same impossible thing. Hope. Terrifying, fragile, dangerous hope. "I'm staying," Daniel said, never breaking eye contact with Grace. "As long as your mama says it's okay, I'm staying as long as you want me here." Evan cheered and threw his arms around Daniel's neck. Daniel's eyes went wide, then soft with wonder, as he carefully hugged his son for the first time. Grace pressed her hand to her mouth, tears finally spilling over. And for the first time in 5 years, they weren't tears of anger or grief. They were something far more complicated, something that felt dangerously close to healing. That fragile beginning quickly found a rhythm. The joyful chaos of Evan's voice in the hotel room was replaced by the quiet, focused energy of the test kitchen, late at night. 3 days after that first meeting, Grace stood elbow-deep in sourdough starter, the familiar scent of yeast and vanilla grounding her, while Daniel pored over laptop screens at the island behind her. Days were for Daniel and Evan. Parks, museums, the aquarium. But nights were for this, hunting for evidence that would bury Victor Hart. "Found something," Daniel said quietly. Grace's hands stilled in the dough. She'd been kneading for 20 minutes, working out tension that had nowhere else to go. The kitchen smelled like yeast and vanilla and the espresso Daniel had brought her an hour ago. She turned, wiping flour on her apron. Daniel looked exhausted. Tie discarded, sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled from running his hands through it. But his eyes were sharp, focused on the screen. "What is it?" "Security footage from my father's office. 5 years ago, the night that text was sent." Daniel angled the laptop toward her. "Watch." Grace moved closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, close enough that she caught that cedar and espresso scent that was becoming dangerously familiar. She focused on the screen. The footage showed Victor Hart's office timestamp reading 11:43 p.m. The building's board floor compliance system had captured the audio. Calls on that floor were automatically recorded and archived. Daniel pulled it and had it transcribed. Victor sat at his desk, phone in hand. Not his usual phone, but something smaller, cheaper looking. A burner. He typed something, his face cold and calculated, then made a call. "Victor, it's done. The text is sent. Now contact her friends. Use the script I gave you. Make sure everyone believes she wants distance from Seattle, from him, from everything here." A pause. Someone responding on the other end. "Victor, I don't care if it feels unethical, Martin. I'm paying you to handle problems, and she is a problem. My son is not throwing away his future on some girl with no prospects. Fix this." Another pause. "Victor, good. And Martin, if she tries to contact Daniel again, I want to know immediately. We'll handle it." The footage ended. Grace felt sick. He called her a problem, called me a problem that needed fixing. "Grace." Daniel's voice was rough. "No." She turned away, back to her dough, kneading harder now. Angry. He looked at me and saw something disposable, something that needed to be erased so his precious son wouldn't sully the family name. He was wrong. Daniel stood, moved closer. Not touching, but close. "Grace, he was wrong about everything. About you, about us, about..." "Was he?" Grace's voice cracked. She stopped kneading, hands pressed flat into the dough. "Daniel, look at us. Look at what happened. I spent 5 years raising Evan alone, struggling, building something from nothing. You spent 5 years running a hotel empire. We're from completely different worlds, and your father saw that. Maybe he was just, don't. Daniel's hand covered hers in the dough. Flour dust between their fingers, warm and solid and there. Don't let him make you believe you weren't enough. You were everything, Grace. You are everything. Grace's breath caught. She stared at their hands, his pale skin against her brown, both covered in flour, pressed into dough that would rise and become something beautiful if given time and patience. Like them, maybe, if she could just let herself believe. How do you do that? She whispered. Do what? Make me want to hope again. Grace looked up, met his gaze. Those hazel eyes were too close, too warm, too full of things she wasn't ready to name. Daniel, I spent 5 years being angry, being strong, and now you're here, and Evan loves you already, and every wall I built is crumbling. And I don't. Her voice broke. I don't know how to trust this. Then don't. Daniel's thumb traced circles in the flour on her hand. Gentle, deliberate. Not yet. Trust takes time, Grace. But maybe we can start smaller. Can you trust that I'll show up for Evan? That I'll be consistent, reliable, present? Yes. The answer came instantly. She'd watched him with their son for 3 days, patient, attentive, completely devoted. Yes, I trust that. Good. Daniel's voice dropped lower. Can you trust that I'm not going anywhere? That I meant what I said about cutting ties with my father, about putting you and Evan first? Grace studied his face. The exhaustion there, yes, but also determination, resolve. The face of a man who'd made a choice and wouldn't be swayed. I think so, she said softly. That's enough. Daniel's hand stayed on hers. That's enough for now. We'll build the rest as we go. They stood like that, hands in dough, rain beginning to tap against the windows. The kitchen was warm, quiet, except for the hum of appliances and their breathing. Grace should pull away, should maintain distance, should remember that 3 days ago she'd wanted to destroy this man. And 5 years of anger didn't disappear just because the truth came out. But she didn't pull away. Neither did he. Tell me about Evan's birth, Daniel said quietly. Please, I know it might hurt to talk about, but I need to know. Need to understand what I missed. Grace's throat tightened, but something in his voice, the aching need to know his son's story, made her answer. 23 hours of labor, she said, watching their hands instead of his face. Jessica was there the whole time. I was terrified, not of the birth itself, but of everything after, being alone, not knowing if I could do it. Grace. But then he was here. A small smile tugged at her lips. 6 pounds, 7 ounces, screaming his lungs out, and the nurse put him in my arms, and he opened his eyes, your eyes, and just looked at me, like he knew me, like he trusted me completely. Her voice softened, and I thought, okay, I can do this. For him, I can do anything. You did do it. Daniel's voice was thick. You did everything, Grace. Raised an incredible kid, built a business, survived when you shouldn't have had to survive alone. He stopped, emotion choking him. I'm what? Remarkable. He said it simply. Certainly. You're the most remarkable person I've ever known. Grace finally looked up, met his gaze. The intensity there stole her breath. Want and regret and something deeper. Something that looked like the way he'd looked at her 5 years ago in his apartment, whispering plans about their future, before Victor Hart decided to rewrite their story. Daniel, she whispered, we can't. I know. But he didn't move away. His hand stayed on hers, thumb still tracing patterns in flour. I know it's too soon, that you need time, that I haven't earned the right to. He stopped himself. I know. But Grace, I need you to know something. What? 5 years ago, I was going to propose. And if we'd had that life, if my father hadn't interfered, I would have been there. For the pregnancy, the birth, every sleepless night, every milestone. I would have been your partner, your support, your... His voice cracked. Everything I should have been. But you weren't. The words came out softer than she intended, not accusatory, just sad. And we can't get that back. No. Daniel's expression was devastated. We can't. But Grace, I'm here now. And if you'll let me, I want to be everything going forward. Not just Evan's father, not just... He stopped, searching her face. I want another chance. With you. With us. I know I don't deserve it. I know 5 years is an impossible gap to bridge. But I'm asking anyway. Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. She should say no. Should protect herself. Should remember that hope was dangerous and love had already destroyed her once. But standing here, flour dust between them, his hand warm on hers, rain tapping a rhythm against windows. Ask me again, she whispered. When Victor's dealt with, when the dust settles, when Evan knows the truth and we've figured out how to co-parent without destroying each other. She took a shaky breath. Ask me again then, and maybe I'll have an answer. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either, and the hope that blazed in Daniel's eyes made her chest ache. I'll wait, he said quietly. As long as you need, Grace. I'll wait. They stood there, neither moving, both afraid to break whatever fragile thing was building between them. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression darkening. It's my lawyer. Victor knows we're building a case. He looked at Grace, jaw set. He's going to strike first. Probably try to discredit you before we can expose him. Let him try. Grace pulled her hands free, lifted her chin. I've survived worse than Victor Hart, and this time I'm not alone. Daniel's smile was fierce, proud. No, this time you're not. Grace returned to her dough, shaping it into loaves with practiced hands. Behind her, Daniel returned to his laptop, compiling evidence, building their case. And outside, rain fell harder. The storm was coming, but they'd weather it together. The drive back to the Fairmont was a blur of rain-smeared streetlights. Grace found Jessica waiting in the suite, laptop open, face grim. The story of the night's discoveries spilled out of her in a rushed, pained torrent. The fake number, the manipulated friends, Victor's orchestrated plot. Jessica listened, her arms crossed. When Grace finished, she was silent for a long moment. Okay, fine, she finally said. The old man is a monster. I believe that. But Daniel, he's had 5 years, Gracie. 5 years to wonder, to dig. He's a billionaire with resources, and he only starts a real fight when there's a son involved. She shook her head. I'm just saying, keep your guard up. A man who only fights when he has a legacy to protect isn't fighting for you. The next afternoon, Grace was helping Evan build a block tower in the hotel suite when her phone buzzed with an email from an unknown sender. Subject: thought you should see this, no message. Just an attachment, a PDF of an email chain. Her stomach dropped even before she opened it. The email was dated 10 months ago. From Daniel to someone named Richard Chen, marked attorney-client privileged. Daniel email read, Richard, I need you to look into something discreetly. 5 years ago, a woman I was seeing, Grace Miller, disappeared suddenly. No explanation, no contact. At the time, I accepted it as her choice. But lately, Some things my father said have made me wonder if he might have interfered. Can you dig into what happened around that time? Phone records, any contact between his office and her, anything unusual? Grace's hands started shaking. Richard Chen replied, I can certainly look into this. To clarify, you suspect your father may have deliberately separated you from Ms. Miller? Daniel, I don't know. Maybe. He never approved of her. But I need to know if I've been living a lie for 5 years. Richard Chen. Understood. I'll start pulling records. This may take some time given the age of the data. Daniel, take whatever time you need. But Richard, keep this completely confidential. If my father finds out I'm looking into this, it could get complicated. The email chain continued sporadically over the next 2 months. Richard reporting findings, suspicious gaps in records, oddities in building security logs from that time period. And then nothing. The emails stopped. No follow-up, no resolution. Just Daniel thanking Richard for his preliminary work and saying he'd think about next steps. 10 months ago. Daniel had suspected his father's manipulation for almost a year, had evidence that something was wrong, and he'd just stopped looking. Until Grace showed up with news of a son. Mama? Evan's voice cut through the roaring in her ears. You okay? Grace looked down at her son's concerned face and felt something crack inside her chest. I'm fine, baby. The lie tasted like ash. Keep building. Mama just needs to make a phone call. She walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and dialed Daniel's number with trembling fingers. He answered on the second ring. Grace, is everything okay? Is Evan... When were you going to tell me? Her voice was eerily calm. A pause. Tell you what? That you suspected your father 10 months ago. That you had a lawyer investigating. That you found evidence something was wrong. Grace's grip on the phone turned white-knuckled. When were you going to mention that you knew, or at least suspected, that I didn't just abandon you, and you did nothing about it? The silence on the other end was deafening. Grace? Daniel's voice was strained. How did you... Someone sent me the emails. The whole chain between you and Richard Chen. She laughed, bitter and broken. 10 months, Daniel. You've suspected for 10 months that your father manipulated us. And you didn't come find me. Didn't track me down. Just let it go. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Grace's calm was fracturing, rage bleeding through. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I wasn't worth finding. Not until you found out about Evan. Then suddenly you're hiring forensic teams and building cases and fighting your father. So tell me, Daniel, would you have come for me at all if there was no child involved? Grace, please, let me explain. Explain what? That I wasn't enough? That 5 years of wondering wasn't worth a trip to Portland? But 4 years of a son you never met was worth burning your whole life down? Her voice cracked. God, I'm so stupid. I actually started to believe. She stopped herself. It doesn't matter. It matters. Daniel's voice was raw. Grace, it matters more than anything. Please, let me come over. Let me explain in person. No. The word came out flat, final. I need space. I need to think. She took a shaky breath. Evan loves you. I see it. So I'm not taking that away from him. But you and me? Whatever I was starting to feel, whatever I was starting to hope. Her voice broke. I can't do this. Grace. She hung up, pressed her back against the door and slid down to the floor, phone clutched in shaking hands. In the other room, Evan called for her, happy and oblivious. And Grace wondered how many more times her heart could break before there was nothing left to shatter. Grace pressed her back against the door and slid down to the floor, phone clutched in shaking hands. The bedroom door opened and Jessica emerged, her face etched with concern. She took one look at Grace on the floor and was at her side in an instant, sinking down to wrap an arm around her. "He knew," Grace choked out, the words raw. "For 10 months, Jess. He had a lawyer dig up the truth and then he just stopped. He didn't come for me." Jessica let out a long sigh, holding her sister tighter. "Okay, that's a gut punch. And he has one hell of an explanation to give." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But Gracie, the man who was just here reading to Evan, the one who looks at you like you're the only woman in the world, I've seen that too. That's also real. How do both of those things exist in the same person?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "Because people are complicated and sometimes scared," Jessica said, her tone softening from its usual sharpness. "It doesn't excuse it, not even a little. But maybe it explains it. He failed you then, absolutely. But look what he's doing now. He's burning his whole world down for you." She brushed a tear from Grace's cheek. "I'm not saying you have to forgive him. I'm just saying the man he is now might be worth hearing out. Let him explain. And then trust yourself to know if he's the man who failed you 10 months ago, or the man who's fighting for you today." The hit piece dropped 2 hours later. Grace was mindlessly scrolling through her phone, trying not to think about Daniel's stricken voice, when Jessica burst into the room with her laptop. "Grace, you need to see this." The article was from Seattle's most prominent gossip blog, the kind that thrived on taking down the wealthy and powerful, or, more often, anyone who threatened them. Heir's secret baby mama. Gold digger or victim? Below it, a photo of Grace leaving the Hart Grand Hotel 3 days ago with Evan. Evan's face was blurred, but the headline told the story Victor wanted told. Sources close to the Hart family reveal that Daniel Hart, COO of Hart Industries, recently discovered he has a 4-year-old son with Grace Miller, a Portland-based pastry chef. But questions are swirling about Miller's motives and timeline. "She disappeared 5 years ago without a word," says a former friend who wished to remain anonymous. "Suddenly she's back with a child and a contract proposal for Hart's flagship hotel. The timing is suspicious." Miller's business. Miller Confections was reportedly struggling financially before securing the lucrative Hart contract. Meanwhile, sources suggest she never attempted to contact Daniel Hart about the pregnancy, only appearing when she needed money and access to the Hart fortune. Victor Hart, patriarch of the Hart family, declined to comment on what he called a private family matter. But insiders suggest the family is exploring legal options regarding custody and Miller's claims. The article continued, painting Grace as a calculated opportunist who'd trapped a billionaire's son and was now cashing in. Every word was a lie, wrapped in enough truth to make it believable. Grace read it twice, then set the laptop down with mechanical precision. "Grace?" Jessica's voice was worried. "Say something." "He did this." Grace's voice was hollow. "Victor, this is his counterstrike. Daniel said he would move first, and he did." "What are you going to do?" Grace looked at Evan, still playing with his blocks, safe in his bubble of 4-year-old innocence. Then at her phone, where messages were already flooding in. Reporters, curious acquaintances, concerned friends. "I'm going to protect my son," she said quietly. "That's all that matters now." Her phone buzzed, Daniel calling for the 7th time. Grace declined it and turned her phone off. Grace set the phone on the counter like it might burn her fingers. The dam of hope she'd carefully let rise hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. The knock came at 8 p.m., just as Grace was getting Evan ready for bed. "I'll get it," Jessica said, heading for the door. Grace heard low voices, then Jessica returned with Daniel in tow. He looked wrecked, hair disheveled, tie gone, eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying or hadn't slept or both. "Grace, please, not now." Grace gestured to Evan in his dinosaur pajamas. "It's bedtime." "I know, Daniel stopped, taking in the sight of his son clutching a stuffed triceratops. His expression softened despite everything. "Hey, buddy. Big day tomorrow at the Science Center?" "Yeah." Evan's face lit up, oblivious to the adult tension crackling in the room. "Mama said we're seeing the new fossil exhibit." "That sounds amazing." Daniel crouched down. "Would it be okay if I read you your bedtime story tonight?" Evan looked at Grace. "Can he, Mama?" Grace wanted to say no, wanted to keep distance between them, protect herself, protect Evan from the inevitable moment when Daniel's interest waned or Victor's money talked louder than promises. But Evan's hopeful face. "Okay," she said quietly. "One story." Evan cheered and grabbed Daniel's hand, dragging him toward the bedroom. "I have a new dinosaur book. It's about velociraptors hunting in packs." Grace followed them, leaning against the doorframe as Daniel settled on the edge of Evan's bed. Her son, their son, snuggled under the covers, stuffed triceratops tucked under one arm. Daniel picked up the book with trembling hands and began to read. His voice was low, steady, soothing. He did different voices for each dinosaur. Made Evan giggle with raptor sounds, asked questions that made their son think. And when Evan's eyes started drooping halfway through, Daniel kept reading anyway, softer now, like the words were a lullaby. Grace watched from the doorway and felt her carefully constructed walls tremble. This man, who'd missed 4 years, who'd failed to find her when he'd had the chance, loved their son with a fierceness that couldn't be faked. But did he love her? Or was she just the obstacle between him and Evan? Daniel finished the book and carefully set it aside, tucked the blankets around Evan with gentle hands, brushed their son's curls back from his forehead. "Sleep good, buddy," he whispered. "Dream about dinosaurs." "'Kay," Evan mumbled, already half asleep. Then, so quietly Grace almost missed it. "Love you." Daniel froze. Evan was asleep. The words unconscious, automatic. The kind of thing he said to Grace every night, without thinking. But this was the first time he'd said it to Daniel. And Daniel pressed his hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Grace's own eyes burned. She slipped out of the room before he could see her cry. 2 minutes later, Daniel emerged, found her in the sweet small kitchen, gripping the counter, trying to hold herself together. "Grace, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just..." Her voice broke. "Just tell me the truth. When you found out about Evan, did that change things? Would you have come for me at all if there was no child?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I don't know." The honesty gutted her. 10 months ago, when Richard sent me those preliminary findings, I was terrified. Daniel continued, voice raw. Terrified of what it meant if my father had really done what I suspected. Terrified of reopening wounds that had barely scarred over. Terrified of finding you and discovering you really had chosen to leave, that my father's interference was just wishful thinking on my part. "So you stopped looking." "So I stopped looking," he admitted. "I told myself I was respecting your choice, that if you'd wanted to contact me, you would have. That maybe it was better not to know." He laughed bitterly. "I was a coward, Grace. I chose comfort over truth, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." "But Evan changed things." Evan changed everything. Daniel's voice was fierce now. Finding out I had a son, that I'd missed 4 years of his life because I was too afraid to dig deeper, it broke something in me. Made me realize I'd been living half a life, telling myself I was fine when I was just existing. He took a step closer. Grace didn't move away. You want to know if I would have come for you without Evan? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe eventually, maybe never. But Grace, his voice cracked. I'm here now. I'm fighting now. And yes, Evan is part of that. But it's not just him. Then what is it? You. Daniel's hazel eyes burned into hers. Seeing you again. Seeing what you've built. Seeing how you've survived and thrived despite everything that was done to you. Grace, you're incredible. You always were. And I was too broken and too cowardly to fight for us before. But I'm fighting now. Not just for Evan. For us. For the chance to build something with you, if you'll let me. Grace's throat was too tight to speak. I know I don't deserve it, Daniel continued. I know I failed you. Failed us. But Grace, I'm asking you to give me a chance to make it right. Not because of Evan. Because of you. Because 5 years ago I was going to propose, and that hasn't changed. I still want forever with you. His voice broke. I just need you to believe me. I don't know if I can, Grace whispered. Daniel, I want to. God, I want to. But every time I start to trust, something happens that reminds me how easily people leave, how easily love breaks. Then let me prove it. Daniel's voice was urgent now. Let me prove I'm not going anywhere. Grace, did you see the article? Of course I saw it. Then you know what's coming. My father's going to fight dirty. He's going to try to paint you as a gold digger, try to take Evan, try to destroy everything you've built. Daniel's jaw set. And I'm going to stop him. How? Press conference, tomorrow morning. You, me, and every piece of evidence we've compiled. Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her a prepared statement. We tell the truth, all of it. The fake text, the manipulation, the 5 years we lost. We expose him for exactly what he is. Grace read the statement, her heart pounding. This will destroy your relationship with your father. I don't have a relationship with him. Not anymore. Daniel's voice was hard. He took 5 years from us, Grace. 5 years from Evan. I'm done protecting him. And your position at the company? The board will probably force me out once this goes public. Daniel shrugged. I don't care. I have my own money, my own investments. I'll be fine. We'll all be fine. Daniel, I'm choosing you. He said it simply. Certainly. You and Evan. Over the company, over my father, over everything. That's my choice. I just need to know. He searched her face. Will you stand with me? Tomorrow, in front of the cameras? Will you let me fight for us? Grace stared at him. At the man who'd broken her heart, who'd failed to find her, who'd loved their son from the first moment and was looking at her now like she was his salvation. And she thought, maybe love isn't about never failing. Maybe it's about fighting harder after you've failed. Okay, she whispered. Tomorrow. We do this together. The relief that crossed Daniel's face was devastating. Thank you, he breathed. Grace, thank you. They stood there in the kitchen, 2 feet apart. The weight of 5 years and one impossible choice between them. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression darkening. My father. He wants to meet. Tonight. Says if I don't come, he'll file for emergency custody of Evan. Grace's blood ran cold. He can try. He won't win, but he can make our lives hell trying. Daniel's jaw clenched. I need to go. need to face him. But Grace, he looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. After tomorrow, after we've dealt with him, I need to ask you something. Something I should have asked 5 years ago. Will you wait for me? What are you asking? Wait and see, Daniel said softly. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Grace stood in the empty kitchen, heart pounding, hope and terror warring in her chest. Tomorrow they'd face Victor Hart. Tomorrow they'd tell the truth. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally get their second chance. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the Hart Grand's ballroom. Grace stood backstage at 9:55, wearing a simple black dress and the armor of 5 years' survival. Beside her, Daniel was in a crisp navy suit, jaw set, eyes hard. You ready? He asked quietly. Our counsel filed the exhibits with the board and the court this morning, Daniel murmured. We're not just speaking, we're on the record. No. Grace took a shaky breath. But let's do it anyway. They walked out together onto the small stage. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Grace saw Victor in the back of the room, his expression cold and calculating. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. 5 years ago, he began, voice steady and clear. My father, Victor Hart, orchestrated an elaborate scheme to separate me from the woman I loved. He sent fake text messages, manipulated our friends and contacts, and made sure we could never reach each other. Why? Because he didn't approve of Grace Miller. Because she didn't fit his vision for the Hart family legacy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel continued, laying out the evidence methodically. The phone records, the security footage, the lawyer's emails, the testimony from Patricia Keene, Victor's assistant, who'd finally agreed to tell the truth in exchange for immunity. Every damning detail. And then he said the words that changed everything. As a result of my father's actions, I missed the first 4 years of my son's life. My son, Evan, who Grace raised alone while I was fed lies about her disappearance. My father's prejudice, his racism, his classism, his need for control, cost us 5 years we can never get back. He looked directly at Victor. But it ends today. I'm resigning from Hart Industries, effective immediately. I'm severing all financial ties with the Hart family. And I'm choosing the family that matters, Grace and Evan. The family my father tried to destroy. Then Daniel stepped back, and Grace stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was strong. 5 years ago, I was 25, pregnant and terrified. I thought the man I loved had thrown me away. I built a life in Portland, raised my son, and survived. Now I know the truth, that we were both victims of someone who saw people as problems to be managed rather than human beings with dignity and rights. She looked at the cameras. I'm not here for money. I'm not here for the Hart name. I'm here because my son deserves to know his father. And because the truth matters. The room erupted in questions. But Grace only saw Daniel, looking at her with something that felt dangerously like love. The cacophony of shouted demands faded into a meaningless roar in Grace's ears. The only thing that felt real was Daniel's hand finding hers, his grip firm and sure as he led her from the stage, away from the flashing lights, through a maze of corridors until the noise was just a distant hum. A heavy door shut behind them, muting the last of the chaos. They found themselves on a quiet balcony. The cool evening air, a balm after the stifling heat of the ballroom. Below, the city lights glittered, indifferent to the earthquake they had just caused. The press conference was over. Victor had left in fury. The board was in emergency session, and they were, for the first time since it began, completely alone. You did it? Grace said softly. You really chose us? There was no choice, Daniel replied. Grace, it's always been you. She turned to face him, saw the truth written in every line of his face. Ask me, she whispered, what you wanted to ask. Daniel's breath caught. Grace Miller. 5 years ago, I bought a ring and planned a proposal. I lost my chance then. But I'm asking now. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Not the original ring, but something simpler, more meaningful. Not to marry me, not yet. But to let me court you properly, to build trust slowly, to earn back what we lost. Will you give me that chance? Grace looked at the promise ring. Delicate, beautiful, patient, like what they were building. Yes, she breathed. And then Daniel was kissing her. Soft at first, reverent, like she was something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. Then deeper, 5 years of longing and grief and hope pouring into the contact. Grace melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, both breathless, Daniel whispered, We go slow. Your pace. Whatever you need. Thank you, Grace whispered back. And in that moment, on a balcony overlooking Seattle with their future uncertain, but finally, theirs to build. Grace let herself hope. Really, truly hope. For the first time in 5 years, the legal gears, set in motion by their press conference, began to turn with brutal efficiency. The fixer broke 3 days after the press conference. The moment Daniel had walked out of his father's study the night before, he'd known it was for the last time. The memory of Victor's face, contorted in bitter fury, was still seared behind his eyes. Daniel's voice had been ice. You destroyed our lives. Was your legacy really so fragile that it could be threatened by one woman? Victor's composure had finally cracked, but not with guilt, with a bitter, righteous fury. You think this is simple? This is about survival. I built this empire from a 2-star motel my father lost to debt. I married your mother because the bank wouldn't loan a heart money, but they would loan the Caldwell's son-in-law. I spent my life making the right, hard choices to ensure our name would never be weak, never be vulnerable again. So you decided who was worthy of my love? Daniel had snarled. I decided who was worthy of this family's future. Victor shot back. It wasn't just that she was a broke art student, Daniel. It was that she would always be an outsider here. The press, the board, our partners, they wouldn't see a love story. They'd see a liability. They'd see you being taken advantage of. They'd whisper, and those whispers would follow our name forever. I was protecting you from that. An outsider? Daniel had repeated, the word tasting like acid. Don't use coward's language, Father. If you're going to ruin lives, at least have the guts to say why. You mean she's black? You were protecting me from the whispers you're so afraid of because my son and the woman I love are black. He took a step forward, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. But here's what you failed to understand. We aren't living in your gilded age. This is the 21st century. Your whispers are just the pathetic, dying echoes of a world you're desperate to cling to. And I want no part of it. You're throwing away everything I built for my family, Daniel finished, his voice final. You didn't protect me. You imprisoned me in your own bitterness and bigotry. And you didn't see her at all. You just saw a problem. Daniel had turned and walked out then, the finality of the slammed door echoing the finality in his heart. There was no going back. Now, standing in the quiet of his own apartment the next morning, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only a grim resolve. He picked up his phone and called the one person who made it all matter. Grace answered on the second ring. Daniel, is everything okay? Is Evan? Martin Voss just walked into my attorney's office, he said, the grim resolve in his voice giving way to a thread of triumph. He's confessing. Everything. Grace's hands stilled on the buttercream she'd been whipping in the hotel test kitchen. Her new workspace after Hart Industries offered her a permanent contract, one she'd negotiated herself with lawyers Daniel insisted on paying for. Everything? Why now? The press conference was the final straw. The board launched a full-scale forensic audit the moment I resigned. They found the discretionary fund payments Voss used to pay off your friend's lawyer. They were hours away from filing a criminal referral for misappropriation of corporate funds and conspiracy. Daniel let out a short, harsh breath. He saw the walls closing in. My father's protection vanished the second I walked away. Voss is turning state's evidence against Victor to save his own skin. The board is forcing him out. There might be criminal charges, fraud, harassment, conspiracy. It's over. Over. 5 years of believing she wasn't enough. 5 years of Daniel believing she'd abandoned him. All because one man decided their love wasn't worthy of his legacy. Grace? Daniel's voice softened. You still there? Yeah. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of buttercream on her cheek. I'm here. I'm just... Her voice cracked. It's really over? It's really over. A pause, then quieter. Can I come see you? I know you're working, but I need to see you. Grace's heart did that traitorous flutter it had been doing constantly since the kiss. Since the promise ring she now wore on her right hand, warming her skin like a secret. Test kitchen, 3rd floor. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He made it in 3. Grace heard the door open, turned with a smile already forming, and froze. Daniel stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit, tie slightly loosened, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Raw, blazing, looking at her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Hi, she managed. Hi. He crossed the kitchen in 4 strides, and suddenly he was right there. Close enough that she could smell cedar and espresso and something underneath that was just him. You have buttercream on your face. What? Grace reached up self-consciously. Here. Daniel's thumb brushed her cheek, gentle and deliberate, wiping away the smudge. But his hand didn't drop. Instead, it cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. Grace. Her name in his mouth still did things to her, made her want things she was trying very hard to take slowly. Daniel. It came out breathier than intended. I need to tell you something. His voice was low, intimate, meant only for her. These past few days, watching you handle everything with such grace. He smiled softly at the unintentional pun. Watching you build your business, negotiate contracts, stand up to reporters, be an incredible mother. Grace, I'm in awe of you, every single day. Daniel, let me finish. His other hand found her waist, steadied her, burned through the thin fabric of her shirt. 5 years ago, I loved you. But I was young, and that love was untested. Now I've seen what you're made of. I've seen you survive the unsurvivable and come out stronger. I've seen you with Evan, watched you mother him with such fierce love it takes my breath away. And Grace, his voice dropped lower, rougher. I'm so completely, desperately in love with you that sometimes I can't think straight. Grace's breath caught. You love me. I love you. He said it simply, certainly, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. Not just because you're Evan's mother, not just because of what we had 5 years ago. I love you, who you are now. who you've become, who you've always been underneath. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love the way you hum when you're baking. I love how you fight for what matters. I love... His voice cracked. I love everything, Grace. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you too. The words hung between them, fragile and fierce. Yeah. Daniel's smile was tremulous, hopeful, devastating. Yeah. Grace's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer until they were breathing the same air. I tried not to. Tried to stay angry, stay protected. But Daniel, you show up every day. For Evan, for me. You're patient and present, and you look at me like... She stopped, overwhelmed. Like what? Like I'm everything. The confession came out whispered, aching. You are everything. Daniel's forehead pressed against hers. Grace, you're my everything. You and Evan, you're my whole world. They stood like that, wrapped around each other in a test kitchen that smelled like vanilla and hope. And Grace felt something inside her, finally, fully heal. Kiss me, she whispered. Daniel groaned softly. Grace, if I kiss you now, I'm not going to want to stop. Then don't stop. His control snapped. The kiss was nothing like the gentle one on the balcony. This was 5 years of longing and grief and desperate, aching need. Daniel's hands tangled in her hair, pulled her closer, and Grace gasped against his mouth. He swallowed the sound, deepened the kiss, backed her against the counter. Grace's hands roamed, his shoulders, his chest, his hair, relearning him, claiming him. He tasted like coffee and promise and home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel's eyes were dark with want. We should slow down, he said, even as his thumb traced her bottom lip. We should, Grace agreed, even as her hands slid under his suit jacket. We're taking this slow, your pace. His voice was strained. My pace. Grace pulled him down for another kiss. This one softer, but no less devastating. And my pace says I'm ready for more. Not everything. Not yet. But more. Daniel's breath shuddered out. Grace, take me to dinner, she said against his lips. A real date. Then take me home, to your place, my place, I don't care. And let's see where the night goes. You're killing me. But his smile was brilliant, hopeful, full of love and promise. Is that a yes? That's a yes to everything. Daniel kissed her again, slow and sweet and full of tomorrow. To dinner, to taking this further, to building whatever this is between us. Yes, Grace. Always yes. That always stretched into days, then weeks, then months. The hotel suite was exchanged for a real lease, then, finally, a set of keys to a house with a backyard. The frantic, fearful energy of their reunion slowly melted into the comfortable rhythm of a shared life. Now, 3 months after that kiss in the test kitchen, Grace stood in their kitchen and watched Daniel, her fiancé, read Evan a bedtime story through the open bedroom door. Their son was sprawled across Daniel's lap, dinosaur pajamas already rumpled, fighting sleep the way he always did. And the velociraptor said to the triceratops. Daniel made an exaggerated raptor voice that had Evan giggling. Daddy, that's not what raptors sound like. Daddy. Grace's heart clenched the way it did every time Evan said it. They'd told him the truth 2 months ago, gentle, age-appropriate, prepared for questions. Evan had listened seriously, looked between them, then said, So Daniel's my daddy? For real? For real, Grace had confirmed. Evan had thought about it for approximately 3 seconds before launching himself at Daniel with a hug that had made both adults cry. He'd been calling him Daddy ever since. Now Grace watched them, father and son, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for second chances. "Mama," Evan called from the bedroom. "Come say goodnight." Grace set down the dish towel and padded to the bedroom. Daniel was tucking Evan in, but their son had his arms outstretched. She leaned down for a hug. Evan's small arms wrapped around her neck, and he whispered, "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. Sweet dreams." "Love you, Daddy," Evan said, already yawning. "Love you, buddy." Daniel kissed his forehead. Dream about dinosaurs. They dimmed the lights and slipped out together. Daniel's hand found the small of Grace's back, guiding her down the hallway, a casual touch that still sent electricity through her. In the kitchen, Grace returned to cleaning up from dinner while Daniel poured them wine. This had become their routine. Evan's bedtime, then quiet time together, talking about their days, stealing kisses, building a life. Grace was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way she'd thought she'd never be again. "Grace?" Daniel's voice made her turn. He was standing by the window, backlit by city lights, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He set down his wine glass, took a breath. "Actually, everything's right. Maybe for the first time in 5 years, everything's exactly right." Grace's heart started pounding. "Daniel, I've been waiting to ask you something." He crossed to her, took her hands. "For 5 years, actually. 6, if we're counting from when I first planned it." "Daniel?" Her voice shook. "When we were together before, I was going to propose. Had a ring custom made, my grandmother's diamonds reset in a design I thought you'd love. Simple, elegant, with enough sparkle to remind you how brilliant you are." His smile was soft, nervous. "I kept that ring. Even after you disappeared, even after I thought you'd left me. I couldn't get rid of it. Kept it in my desk drawer like a talisman, like proof that what we had was real." Tears were already falling. Grace couldn't stop them. "These past months, falling in love with you all over again, or maybe just deeper, truer. I kept thinking about that ring, about the proposal I never got to make, about the life we should have had." Daniel's voice thickened. "We can't get back those 5 years, Grace. Can't undo what was done to us. But we can have forever going forward." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opened it. The ring was exactly as he'd described, simple, elegant, brilliant. 3 diamonds set in platinum, the center stone surrounded by smaller ones that caught the light like promises. "Grace Miller." Daniel dropped to one knee, and Grace's breath left in a rush. "I loved you 6 years ago. I love you now. I'll love you 60 years from now. You're my partner, my best friend, the mother of my child, and the love of my life. I don't want slow anymore. I don't want careful. I want forever." His voice cracked. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you?" "Yes." The word came out choked, tearful, certain. "Yes, Daniel. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit like it had been waiting 6 years to come home, and stood, pulling her into his arms. The kiss was everything. Celebration and promise and love so big it couldn't be contained. When they broke apart, both crying, both laughing, Daniel cupped her face. "I'm going to make you so happy," he vowed. "You already do?" Grace kissed him again, softer now. "Every single day, you already do." They stood wrapped around each other in their kitchen, the ring sparkling on her finger, their son sleeping peacefully down the hall. And everything, finally felt right. 8 months later, Evan's 5th birthday party was exactly what he'd wanted. Dinosaurs, cake, and all his favorite people. Grace stood in their backyard, theirs the house they'd bought together 3 months ago, the place that finally felt like home, and watched Evan show his friends his new Velociraptor toy from Daniel. "Mrs. Hart?" Grace turned. Jessica was holding out a glass of wine, grinning. "Still getting used to that?" "Every time." Grace laughed, touching the wedding band that now sat below her engagement ring. They'd married quietly 2 months ago. Just family, just love. Just them finally getting their happy ending. "You look happy, Gracie." Jessica's eyes were soft. "Really, truly happy." "I am." Grace watched Daniel crouch down to Evan's level, listening intently as their son explained some complex dinosaur fact. "We all are." The party wound down as evening fell. Friends departed, Jessica left with promises to visit soon. And finally, it was just the three of them. Evan was nearly asleep on the couch, chocolate cake smeared on his chin, clutching his new toy. "Come on, birthday boy." Daniel scooped him up. "Let's get you to bed." "But I'm not tired," Evan protested, eyes already closing. "Sure you're not." Grace kissed his forehead. "Happy birthday, baby." "Best birthday ever," Evan mumbled. "'Cause Mama and Daddy are happy. That was my wish." Grace's throat went tight. She met Daniel's gaze over their son's head, saw her own emotion reflected there. 20 minutes later, Evan was tucked in and dreaming. Grace and Daniel stood in their kitchen, the heart of their home, cleaning up the remnants of the party. Grace was rinsing plates when Daniel's arms came around her from behind. His chin rested on her shoulder, body warm and solid against her back. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. Grace leaned into him, let herself be held, let herself feel the safety and love she'd fought so hard to trust. "So happy?" She turned in his arms, looped her hands around his neck. "Daniel, I know." He kissed her softly. "I feel it too." The kitchen glowed with warm light. Somewhere, a cake knife needed washing. Tomorrow, there would be thank you notes to write and new toys to organize. But right now, there was just this. Her husband's arms around her, their son sleeping peacefully upstairs, their life built from wreckage and hope stretching out before them. "Home?" Grace whispered. The question they'd been asking each other since that first night together. "Home," Daniel confirmed, kissing her again, deeper now, full of promise and heat and tomorrow. And as Grace melted into her husband's embrace in the kitchen that smelled like birthday cake and cinnamon and love, she knew with absolute certainty. They were finally, beautifully, irrevocably home. Thank you for joining Grace and Daniel on their difficult but beautiful journey back to each other and to finding their way home. If their story moved you, be sure to subscribe for more powerful audio stories about love, secrets, and second chances.